But let's deal with some hard questions for evolutionists. How do you explain, and by the way, I hope there are evolutionists present tonight. There was a time I held avidly to the evolutionary persuasion. I graduated from that persuasion, I thought, to an old age creation position. I was in Hugh Ross camp for a period of time, for decades. I still have students running around teaching others that I taught in error. It was not until I went to Glen Rose in completing the master's program in archaeology to excavate a single dinosaur footprint. To this date, I've excavated over 600, but in that procedure, I excavated 19 original tracks by removing the overburden, had a fine team of volunteers helping me as I was documenting every phase and doing the actual excavation once they did the hard work. We were excavating a trail of dinosaur footprints. I terminated the excavations. If my will had been followed, I would not be standing here tonight. What happened next changed the course of my life. My flight was scheduled the next morning. And I said, let's stop. And the team said, if we'll do the work, you tell us what to do, let us remove one more slab. You see, we, by hand, removed the slabs, and then I delicately excavated through the clay marl. So I said, okay, just one more. So they removed by hand one. We have that full documentation. And I started excavating, and I stopped, and I said, oh, just this trail of dinosaur tracks, we have enough of those. I have to get back to St. Louis. One of my assistants got down, and he dug a little further, and then he said, Doc, come here, please. I said, okay, I'm getting ready to leave, Charles. And he said, you need to see this. He said, I just excavated enough to get the rounded tip. And I glanced and said, well, that's just another dinosaur track. I've got to get to the airport. And he said, it's pretty round. And all of these dinosaur footprints, the digits of these tracks, are rather pointed. This is round. Didn't you come down to try to find some human tracks? I said, yeah, but I gave up on that two days ago. He said, maybe you better take over. So I stepped back in, continued the excavation. What turned out was a large human footprint, perfect in every detail, 17.5 inches from a dinosaur footprint. And we documented it. That blew my mind. I didn't sleep for 4 days and nights because at that point, I held to an old age, long age geological creation position, the gap theory. I put the dinosaurs in that gap unknowingly. But here we had man and dinosaur contemporaneously. Let's see what the results might be. Hard questions for the evolutionist. How do you explain the geologic column? I was in their camp after I abandoned evolution and became a creationist. I still interpreted the data from the cosmological Big Bang. Debris from that Big Bang settled in the arm of Orion of the Milky Way galaxy and produced our solar system. And about 3.5 billion years ago, early bacteria evolved according to that idea. And then about a little under 600 million years ago, early trilobites began to evolve. Living systems continued to evolve until the current time. Well, we have some hard questions for the evolutionist who holds to that. When I discovered the first human footprints among dinosaur footprints in modern era, and I was assisted by a very fine team of volunteers, others had found the same thing. But it was way up here, and we found the footprints of a cat among the dinosaur and human tracks along the Biloxi River. The evolutionary community broadcast propaganda saying, no, doesn't Baugh know? They went on television in the St. Louis Metroplex, and doesn't Baugh know that the cats didn't evolve until 6 million years ago? There's no way they could be back here, but they were genuine cat prints. And they said no mammal was anywhere near there until they found this little mammal, Morganocodon elroy, little Morgie. Once they made the discovery, then they said, oh, well, maybe mammals were back there. But how do you explain the inconsistency? Watch the following. If evolution is true, it began with a Big Bang some approximate 16 billion years ago. It will end, all of these wonderful living systems and all these wonderful worlds will end in the Big Crunch. If there's enough mass in the universe, according to evolutionary theory, all of the entire universe will collapse back upon itself. Or, if there's not enough mass in the universe, instead, all of these marvelous galaxies will extend out and out and out until they have lost contact with each other for an interchange of energy, and the universe will die in the Big Freeze. Or if instead, and all of this is in the technical literature, if evolution is true, if there's enough mass in the universe, it'll collapse upon itself in the Big Crunch. Or all of these galaxies will extend out and out and out without the interchange of energy, and the universe will die in the Big Freeze. Or if it's fairly well balanced, it's ultimately, because of the second law of thermodynamics, going to die in the Big Fizzle. And this is the technical terminology. Did you notice? No matter how you cut it, hopelessness is rampant. Confidence is destroyed in the evolutionary model. I think that's one of the most insidious things about evolution. It destroys any hope for the future. Well, but I came to let you know evolution is not true. This, a hard question for my evolutionary friend would be the following. In every one of these layers, these eras, periods, epochs of time, some 570 supposed million years of time, and I say supposed, those ages are simply stated without any scientific verification. In fact, just the opposite is true. Watch. Between every one of these eras, epochs, and periods of time, there are polystrate fossils. What is a polystrate fossil? Poly means many, straight means layer or stratum. There are fossils between every one of them if you look far enough. This is one near Cookeville, Tennessee. This photograph is from National Geographic. We took photographs. We were the first creation group permitted to go in after 3 or 4 decades of time, because it screams loudly and clearly to recency. Watch closely. This is coal that is supposed to be about 395 million years old. Watch. The root of that Lepidoplois fern, the root is coalified but intact. All the tentacles are removed from it as if it had been run through water. The stalk of that Lepidoplois extends up through sandstone, more coal, more sandstone, coal, limestone. It extends up through what is termed to be geologically over 5 million years of evolutionary time. Now you tell me, how can that plant, it's a fern, how can it remain in place 1 month or 2 years, let alone 5 million years of evolutionary time? It's a hard question for evolutionary theorists. And between each of these epochs, periods, and eras of time, you find that consistently. You find in every one of these layers man-made artifacts. Quickly, how do you explain, number 2, the worldwide Cretaceous layer of rock? This is a very important question. A few decades ago, in central Texas, near Austin, Geologists first described the Austin Chalk Cretaceous layer in the technical literature. It was called chalk not because it was fragmentary, but because it's whitish, very pure, but it has specific marks, specific index fossils in it. And amazingly, Dr. Derek Egger visited our excavations, a world-class geophysicist and geologist. He published a book. One of the chapters was the nature of the stratigraphic record. And he admitted in that publication that there is a worldwide layer of sedimentary deposit. How do you get sedimentary deposits? They have to be waterborne. And this is worldwide. It is a worldwide sedimentary deposit. There had to be a worldwide flood in order to deposit that sedimentary layer. The Morrison Formation, where we were excavating, I took some of these scholars up to a tree. That tree is now at the Creation Evidence Museum. Just one trunk of it is 30 feet long. Its girth is so big, I can't reach across the width. It is compressed against its contour. It's Araucaria pine. Watch closely. Araucaria pine still lives in South America. This was under 20 layers of sediment. It grows round. But this particular specimen is oval. It's compressed against its contour. Watch closely. These scholars, and they were all evolutionists from NASA, I said, explain this. And they said, we can't. I said, I can explain it. They said, we're listening. We found fully fossilized replaced material in that tree. We also found bark that was still fibrous in that tree. I asked Dr. Gunter, geologist, how do you explain that? He said, I can't. He said, this screams for immediate deposition, immediate lithification, but recency, because some of the bark is still fibrous. Did you get what he admitted? And I said, are you aware of the fact that there are 20 layers above this, approximately 20? He said, yes, that bothers me. I said, are you aware of the fact that this plateau of layering over this compressed tree, this plateau runs through 11 states and into Canada, meaning those 20 layers were deposited over an 11-state Morrison Formation plus Canada, much of Canada, while this tree trunk was still pliable enough to be compressed under the weight into an oval context. Hard questions for evolutionists. Recent creation and a worldwide flood explain that beautifully. Dr. Duane Gish was debating Ernst Mayr of Harvard, the world's leading biological evolutionist of our generation. Dr. Duane Gish is the finest creation debater that has ever been produced. He was debating Ernst Mayr, and Ernst Mayr laughingly said in the recorded debate, he said, why, if your friends along the Biloxi River in Texas could actually prove that those are human footprints made naturally along with the dinosaur footprints, why, if they could really prove that, that would devastate the entire evolutionary model. We would have to start over. Well, he was right, potentially, and he laughed and said, but they'll never do it. Well, I want to give you some new information. Let's make a few observations. First of all, this is the A.M. coffee print, discovered in 1955. A trail of 9 of them in Permian rock. Permian. According to evolution, This is early Permian, about 250 million years old, according to evolutionary theory. Now, according to evolutionary theory, the dinosaurs didn't appear until 228 million, progressively grew more complicated through the Triassic, the Jurassic, and then the Cretaceous, and disappeared about 64 million years ago with Tyrannosaurus rex, according to evolution. About 40,000 years ago, depending on which textbook, which professor, who wants to outdo the other, but about 40,000 years ago, man became so sophisticated and so developed that his sensitive second toe became pronounced. What's so important about this second toe? In the middle of the night, it's the one you stub when you get up and go through the dark to go to the bathroom. It is the most sensitive of all the toes. The second toe, in about 60% of the cases, is longer anatomically than the great toe, the first big toe. The second toe feeds more information neurologically to the brain than any other toe. And against resistance, such as walking in mud, often the neck rides higher and the point dips just a little bit. That is on your Homo sapiens sapien, modern, intelligent, best of the lot that was ever born, toe. If you look closely, that second toe dips even deeper than the great toe. A modern individual made that. It's in Permian rock. That Permian rock where this was found, in north central West Texas near Stinnett, is a part of that 11-state area covered rapidly in a huge flood. And slightly above that, you have that Cretaceous layer that runs worldwide. We're talking about a worldwide flood. Now watch, there's the great toe, sensitive second toe, ball of the foot, medial arch, metatarsal arch, lateral arch, the heel section. That is a human footprint. The creation artifacts, because this is the arena where I live. The geologic ages and the artifacts. In Miocene, Oligocene, human skull was found, a shoe print was found, skull, a skeleton. In all of these eras, epochs, and periods of time, evidence of human occupation has been discovered. Now let's discuss some of these. We have these. I excavated that original print with a human footprint right in the middle of a dinosaur track along the Biloxi River. The great toe, all the other toes, the ball of the foot, the medial arch. Here's a human handprint. This human handprint was discovered near Palo Pinto, Texas, in mid-Cretaceous rock that is assigned an age by evolutionists, geologically assigned an age of 110 million years. But it has a human handprint of an individual who apparently caught himself. You don't narrow your hand, you broaden your hand if you're catching yourself. In so doing, he recorded the thumbnail and the longer digit that stuck into the mud that lithified later. That digit recorded even the fingernail. But what surprised me when our technician, our certified mold maker, poured a latex mold into this to recast, he called me and he said, "I can't believe it." He said not only did the thumbnail record, but where the long central digit thrust into the mud, the fingernail there recorded as well, and the fingernail was trimmed. Those were not unintelligent people. The fingernail was trimmed. Either that, or in the trauma of the flood where he had found he missed the boat, he chewed his fingernails off. I have no idea, and I have great sympathy for him, but it's a little late. Watch. We have this finger. It's on display. This is on display. These are all on displays. This is a spiral CAT scan of one particular image, this finger. We have the fingernail, the cuticle, the taper. That taper is feminine. The head of a university science department was able to say, and he's a specialist in anatomy, it's the fourth finger on the left hand of a girl. Here we have the replaced bone. We ran another more sensitive spiral CAT scan that replaced cartilaginous ligaments. It has the medial, distal, and proximal joints. It is genuine. It is a human fossilized finger found in the same layer with the dinosaur footprints and dinosaur bones, assigned an age of 110 million years. Are those 110 million years genuine? Absolutely not. They're simply assigned. These are during epochs of the worldwide flood. This is the famous hammer, the London artifact. This is found in early Cretaceous rock in central Texas, and the metal cannot be totally reproduced today. If you look very closely, there's a shiny area right there. That is char. A portion of the handle is colified. This was impacted into rock under great pressure, into mud under great pressure. I took this to Battelle Laboratory in Columbus, Ohio. That's the same lab that analyzed the original moonstones. I used the same lab, the same instrument, the same technician as analyzed the original moonstones. Ran a scanning electron microprobe elemental analysis, a beam of electrons streaming down into the metal. Found it was 96.6% iron, 0.4% sulfur, and 2.6% chlorine. You're a physical chemist? Chlorine compounded with iron. Then it has a slight amount of carbon. We cannot compound chlorine with iron today. And by the way, we had another tomographic analysis run, and they said this is the most homogeneous implement we've ever seen. Those were not unintelligent people. Whoever made that missed the boat, by the way. It was dropped in Central Texas. Yes, there were people in Central Texas at that time. Let's look at more of the artifacts and close this out. This is the cup. That cup was found in 1928 by Frank Kennard near Sulphur City, Oklahoma. He was performing an admirable job. He had the midnight shift to keep the power plant going to generate electricity, and he was shoveling coal. There was a huge block of coal. He tried to get it in the furnace, couldn't. So he took a sledge and whacked that huge block of coal. It shattered. Out fell that cup. The sides of the coal showed the crevices. A residue of the coal is still in the bottom of the cup. He put the cup on a ledge, threw the coal in the furnace. I wish he had kept the coal. But he kept the cup, took it home. We now have it at the Creation Evidence Museum. And it's a major problem for evolutionary theorists. Now, we have the Cambrian. We'll close with this artifact. This is possibly the most valuable single artifact in the world. It is more valuable than the crown of the Queen of England. It was discovered by William Meister, 1952, in Cambrian rock. He was looking for trilobites. Cambrian is assigned an age 570 million years. Assigned an age 570 million years. It's at the bottom of the geologic column, just above the granite, in the Cambrian explosion of life. According to evolutionary theory, the basic life forms appeared suddenly, then you have a progression, but at the top, man appeared. Watch. William Meister and his wife Mabel found their trilobites, two of them. That's an Elrathia gingai trilobite an Eleutheria gingi trilobite. They flipped the top off, found the trilobites, but to their absolute amazement, this is not a good photo, but I'll describe what's going on. It's an 8.5-inch long sandal print with a stitching still intact along the sandal. Where along the outside of the heel, the right side, it's a right footprint. The rounded toe, you see the original. It is a human sandal print made by an intelligent person, worn. This individual missed the boat. It's at the bottom of the geologic column. This one artifact puts the entire geologic column into one time frame in the recent past. That single sandal print totally destroys evolutionary theory. Leading evolutionary scholars have admitted that if we could find a horse fossil in the Cambrian, it would wipe it out. We've done better than that. We found evidence of human occupation in the very bottom of the geologic column. Therefore, you did not arrive by evolutionary progression and development. You arrived by the directive purpose and direct hand of Almighty God. We built a biosphere to put living systems in. We ran it for a decade. The results were far better than I ever imagined. So we closed it. We have now opened the enlarged Creation Evidence Museum facility. We have a large chamber, weighs 92,000 pounds, it's 48 feet long, and 11.5-inch ID diameter. We are now building the permanent biosphere. A biosphere is different from a hyperbaric chamber. A hyperbaric chamber simply adds pressure and it adds oxygen ratio. We add the pressure, appropriate pressure, oxygen ratio, carbon dioxide ratio, the humidity, the sound, the light, and a number of other parameter factors. What have been the results? We built a small one first, 7 feet long, 4 foot diameter. We put a Chedrodon contortrix and a Grotilis there. What are those? Rattlesnakes and copperheads. We put them in. We also use the standard study with fruit flies. Now, these fruit flies were standard field fruit flies. And as we used them, we didn't use any exotic food. We simply put them under this context with pulsed electromagnetic energy, the pressure, the oxygen ratio, etc., etc. In the second generation, we tripled the adult lifespan of the fruit flies just by having them in that context. Just by putting them in a pre-flood context as best we can interpret it, we tripled the adult lifespan in the second generation, even with their damaged DNA. That's the equivalent of your living to be 200 years in age, even with your damaged DNA. But the most exotic test we ran, Bill saw those in motion, the copperheads and the rattlesnakes. Snake venom is the most complicated protein structure in biological nature. It has an average of 100 different proteins. And they each serve a purpose, but not in the snake, but in his venom. What's it for? Well, they have a hypodermic needle to vaccinate you. After 4 weeks in the biosphere, we milked the control group and we milked the biospheric snakes. We took the venom to an independent lab in Dallas. They called me to the lab and they said, "We can't believe this." They said, "You've got to let us publish on this," but I have not yet permitted that to be done. They said, "Look, here's your control group with the gnarled spaghetti venom. But they said, look, the biospheric group of both Echidrodon, Contortrix, and Agrodalus are structured. The frayed bonds are not there, the frayed proteins. Theoretically, we have rendered them more potent, but we have rendered them non-poisonous, theoretically. We had these snakes under greater atmospheric pressure. We had them under elevated oxygen and carbon dioxide. But we had them primarily under pulsed electromagnetic energy, and we knew the exact range to put them under. That's very important. We milked the snakes, took the venom back to the lab the second time. The PhD in charge of the program said, we're going to run an electrophoresis analysis. Good. He called me the next week and said, you got to come up here. You got to come up here. We've got 3 PhDs on this, and we're all stunned. He said, you have to let us publish on this. Not yet. He said, look, here's the control group. Here's the biospheric group, or just one of each. He said, I ran the Western blot electrophoresis tear. Okay, so there were 2 columns. He said, here's your control group, the control venom. Here's your biospheric venom. What's this? He said, in this instance, comparing these directly across, same creature, he said, you have enhanced this protein expression. That's like saying you're growing a little more hair on this guy. Pretty good. He said, in this one, you have, in the biosphere, diminished this protein expression. That's like saying you've taken off his warts. Are you still with me? Protein expression. He said, look here. In this protein expression from the control, you have eliminated this in the biospheric snake. Isn't that nice? You get rid of some things you didn't want at all. But he said, this is what threw us. You have expressed a protein that is not expressed in the control venom. You know what that means? The information is already there. That new information that made him more viable or whatever did not come by an evolutionary process, but the environmental factors caused the expression of information that had to be there in the genetic code in order to be expressed. That destroys evolutionary progression. The information has to be in place to be expressed.